Hello everybody, great to see you all. As Wayne said, that we're here to introduce our model, our poultry-centered agriculture agroforestry model to you guys today, and we're also going to be talking about the whole system that this model is just a piece of. And so what we wanted to do today, some of you may have already been in other SFA panels that we've done the last couple of years where we've really been talking about here's the chicken perennial people thing we're creating, and we invite you to learn more about it. This year we're really taking it to the next step. We're going to be talking about the advancements we've made this year and making it possible for other farmers to replicate this, whether you're a beginning farmer, an immigrant farmer, an established farmer. So we're going to be talking about the pieces that we put in place to do that and inviting you more into that discussion. We've got a cluster underway in southeast Minnesota, and there's also other opportunities that are generating around the Midwest. And we're going to just kind of go through the process. So we're going to start with Reynaldo, who is here to, as the founder of this vision and the whole piece, he's going to be talking really about what is this model and system and how does it come into play and what does the system look like when it's put on the ground. We then are going to move to Tony Wells, who's here and going to talk some about what's in it for the farmer, what are some of the de-risking strategies that we've put in place for farmers to make this possible. He's also going to be talking a little bit about the market side, the processing side, and our partnership with Regeneration Farms. Chris Gamer is here to talk about the next piece and what we consider to be very important for raising the visibility of and creating opportunities for more perennials to be put in the ground, because this is a synergy between poultry, perennials. We're really ramping up our sort of moving forward the perennial industry here in the Midwest. And Chris is going to talk about that. And then Rocky Casillas, also on the Main Street Project staff, is here to talk about what our next steps might be. So we have this kind of roundup. We'll be talking about 45 minutes or so, and then there'll be plenty of opportunity for questions and answers. And there's also inserted in here a video. I want to introduce Will Crombie. He's over here to my left, who's our storyteller and videographer, also on staff, and he's helped us put this presentation together and has done the storytelling and the videography for it. So there's a little look at our team right now and who we have here. So thanks for coming, and Reiki, you want to take it away?
Sounds good. Thank you everybody for coming. In Guatemala we have a saying, and I believe there is some other sayings in this country, that when you don't know where you're going, every bus takes you there. Ever heard of that? So we didn't want to do that, because farming is already risky the way it is, and if you don't know where you're going, every idea takes you there, and where there is sometimes it's not very good. So that's how we started this. So we wanted to end up with a poultry-centered, regenerative design. Now, poultry-centered doesn't mean it's about chickens, but it is centered on the chicken. And that's very important to frame up from the start, so that when you see the system design, you find out that we didn't come into this to design a farm. We came into this to design a system first, as a destination, so that we could then get back to the farm level and engineer a system in alignment, a farming production system in alignment with the food system that we wanted to deploy, that is poultry-centered. So those are, it's important for us to be going from project level, which is farm level, to system level, which is much larger than a farm. And that we'll spell it out as we go. It's only 20 minutes, so you're not going to get the full picture, but you will get the core of that picture. Hopefully, we end up with more questions than answers here. The idea is to tease out systems versus projects. Number one, we did not start from the market. When we start from the market as a departing point, it is very easy to compromise very close to the market. And guess what? The markets don't know what they want anyway. Consumers don't know what they want. They think they do, But as they think they do, they make us farmers scramble every day for the new thing they want tomorrow, and then the next day, and then the next day, and we end up spending all the money, and then we are the ones that end up poor, and the consumers always want something else. So what we said was, no, we're not going to start from there. We're going to start from the original geoevolutionary blueprint of the Earth. And the process, the geoevolutionary process that determines how things work, not what consumers want. Because when we start from the other end, we always deliver what consumers want. Because we can tell them this is actually what you meant. You want a product that is natural, that came from the earth, that has no chemicals, that has none of those things that we want, that we don't want, and that it has everything that we want. And so, starting from that point, we said the chicken is a jungle animal. That's really a happy chicken. Chickens don't process pastures. They don't process grasses. They don't process any of that. If you actually look at it from the chicken perspective, what does the chicken really want? It's a freaking jungle. It's scared, literally scared of open spaces, of the sun, of all of that. And yeah, it may nest in grasses, but it won't eat them. So, just to give you an idea, a happy chicken really is a chicken in the jungle. Simple as that. Now, once you understand that, now imagine the incredible world that we open for engineering. Now we really are pumped for the next stage, which is, moving into, okay, so if we move from that perspective, what are the principles that are going to guide the system design? Number one, we want a healthy product. A healthy product for the consumer, and a healthy environment for the chicken, and a healthy environment for the workers, for the farmer, and for everybody in between. So healthiness, critical principle. We won't compromise that. Healthy for the consumer means no antibiotics, no chemicals, none of those things, right? None of the stuff we don't want, everything we want. Concentrated, high nutrition, density, all of those things that we want. If there's going to be fats, let's make them the fats that are actually good for us. All of that. There's nothing in nature that is bad for us inherently. It's only when we throw it out of balance that it becomes toxic and poisonous for us. So, health. Fair, because everybody needs to be treated fairly. From the worker working on a farm, to the farmer trying to make a living, to the consumer being able to have a product that is not artificially increased in price because of our own farm inefficiencies. Inefficiencies shouldn't be the reason we make the product more expensive for the consumer. It should be more expensive for the consumer because there is no such thing as cheap food. That's an illusion. Cheap food is only cheap because it's unfair. It's the result of an unfair system that exploits mostly workers, mostly minorities, takes away $486 billion every 5 years out of our tax pockets because of the Farm Bill, and also pollutes the heck out of our environment, which we have to pay for. That's why we think there is cheap food. So fairness is critical to ensuring that our system is actually regenerative, both on the social side. Transparency, because governance is critical for systems to actually be sustained and enhanced and protected over time. Now, we divided sustainability from resiliency because sustainability for us is really about money. If your farm is not breaking even or making a little bit of a margin, then you can't sustain that. But it's sustaining things is not necessarily good. In some cases, for example, wars, we have sustained them for as long as we have been human beings, and that's not good, but it's sustainable. War is probably one of the most sustainable things we do as human beings, just to give you an idea how we think about this stuff. Resiliency, however, is only the result of the blueprint that we evolved with. That's what makes us resilient, and that's more in alignment with ecological design than sustainability. Okay, that's all about principles. Poultry-centered agroforestry. Now that we understand the jungle, now we can talk about agroforestry, and then we can bring all of the science and all of the experiences out there on agroforestry and then incorporate the poultry in the center of that. That gives us a platform for actual transformation, because it just happens that every small farm in the world, pretty much, of the 500 plus million farmers that produce around 70% of the food today, according to the UN, can accomplish something of this nature. But it also works for large-scale farmers. So when we design for the small scale farmer, we actually don't discriminate against this big farm. When we design only for the big farms, like the industrial system did, then we discriminate everybody else. And that's why we end up as small farmers, stuck with this conundrum that there is no system for us to be part of. Yeah, we may know what we're doing, but what's our system? Where is our USDA? Where is our banking system? Where is our, systems. I don't mean like production, but systems. So what do we say then? Well, we're going to deploy this system to organize and transform existing small farms, train and launch and grow new farmers, and along those, any size farmer, like Wayne said from the beginning, integrate poultry-centered enterprise sectors, we'll see in a second what that means, and engage as a scalable solution to poverty and food insecurity. So that means we have to move this system into an institution rather than a program of any nonprofit or even as a nonprofit. This is just the beginning that we are now getting over the first phase of development, which allows us to stand here and say, okay, we're ready for scale. But this is just the first step. This is very different because we designed for scalability. To be regenerative, you have to really be animal driven. And we picked the poultry because that's the only animal that is compatible with every farm in the world. No other livestock is actually compatible with every farmer. They may be compatible with few, but can't have the triple bottom line impact at the scale that we set out to impact. Our design is also engineered to be compatible with small farms, like I said. We have developed a globally standardized deployment process. This is a pretty simple 4-step process that can be applied anywhere we go. Again, this is not a model. The production with the poultry is, but the system is not just about the poultry again. Every engineering process requires a production unit. The chair you're sitting in is part of the design of a production unit for a chair company, so is the table and the truck and any of those things. The industry and farming and food uses the acre as the production unit. Everything is measured according to the acre. Inputs per acre, outputs per acre, income per acre, compensation per acre, all of that is calculated per acre. Well, that doesn't work in regenerative because regenerative goes from a blueprint, and our blueprint is not a 46,300 square foot acre. See, nature didn't decide flat surfaces. Nature is three-dimensional, four-dimensional. An acre for us is 1,110,200 cubic feet. They go from 12 feet below the ground in this northern territory all the way up to 12 feet above in the case of our hazelnut. So that is a cube, it's not a flat surface. And so that's how the design, the first production unit was designed. And that, if you look at it flat, is 1.5 acres. It's got a building, it's got the same basic infrastructure, it's got 2 paddocks, got fences, but more importantly, it's got those 2 paddocks that can be rotated back and forth with perennial cropping systems with up to 7 canopies of forestry on each one of those, so that, again, the chicken can be home again. On the left is the oldest production unit we have. That's my backyard. That's in the summer. Elderberries already flowering. The darker are the hazelnuts. Hazelnut behind the chicken there. That's really the cornerstone of the management, is the shelter and the paddocks. There are 2 versions. On the right, you got the hazelnuts halfway grown. Those are fully grown now. On the left, you have the corn. We use corn and sunflower rotations to create a canopy while the perennials develop. The key is to always keep good cover so the chickens will roam as far from the buildings as they so want, unrestricted, which allows us to do many other things. One of them is to start reducing the dependency of ground up feed by putting in grain mixes that actually do well if the chicken is outside like that. You can't do this if the chicken is either on a chicken tractor or in a building. Only works if you have the open space like that, and if you have created the ground conditions that allows for this process of germination, sprouting, and all of that. And that means increasing the humidity in the soil, which only happens if you can reduce the temperature of the soil, which can only happen if you put that canopy on top, and can only happen if you put those perennials, because it also happens that the chicken puts a lot of manure in the soil, mostly nitrogen. Up to 60% of that manure is nitrogen, which needs to be taken out. A hazelnut bush, for example, per acre at 800 to 1,000 plants per acre can absorb up to 300 pounds of nitrogen, on and on and on the agronomics goes. The chain reaction is pretty straightforward. if you're following that.
Pretty straightforward.
Now, from there, the production unit, you can put as many production units as we may consider safe and biologically, stable and risk, it can lower our risk. So this farm, Regeneration Farms, Tom is going to talk about, it's got 5 production units on the bottom. Well, we built the first one on the left, and then we have the other 4. Hopefully, we're going to finish them this year. The north side of that farm is all of the alley cropping systems where the manure will be used to develop, to support hazelnuts and other species, as well as alley cropping. So, what does scale means once you get this foundational in place? Scale means you put the poultry in the center, and then as far as an economic development strategy, you start aggregating the symbiotically related enterprise sectors: poultry processing, grain production, manure management, because now you got to manage that to turn that manure into high value inputs for the grain producers and vegetable producers, perennial systems outside of where the chickens roam, and you go on and on. Food security, edible grains, even aquaponics, fish and vegetable. We tested this, and it's very easy to incorporate. Once you have poultry processing, you're going to have other kinds of byproducts that can become inputs for another production cycle. You can feed chickens to fish and then fish back to chicken. The byproducts of those, but you can't feed fish to fish and chicken to chicken. That's not the way nature designed it. But cross-species feeding is actually natural in nature, and so on. At the end, we end up with over 14 different enterprise sectors that allows us to deploy industry-level services. Now we can talk about infrastructure for a system-level design, which means financing, we need technical assistance, training, all of that kind of stuff. Clusters means bringing these farmers into clusters so that system actually can take place. Those clusters are divided from the production unit. We can profile a production unit. Production unit, 1.5 acres for broilers. You're producing up to 28,000 pounds per unit. And depending on how you're marketing this, you can go straight into contracting at $7.50 a chicken. These are actually, we all have produced chickens. I probably produce the most walks. We calculated all of this based on our own experiences, to a total of around 1 production unit, generating this kind of production in a year, can mean upwards of $52,000 for a farm in a 1.5 acre unit, plus the hazelnuts when they come available. Now, on the egg production, we are basing this on 3 leading countries that are doing this already. So we didn't actually design our unit, we just incorporated good quality design from other countries. 8,000 layers is a upper level. I mean, you can do 2,000 if you want, 1,000 if you want, but this is where we calculated. And 6 acres per production unit. So just to give you an idea, gross value at around $2.90, $2 a dozen. You're looking at around $365,000 a year for a 6-acre production unit. In Brazil, I just visited an operation with 125,000 egg layers. They are the largest producer of organic eggs in the country, and leading with a design just a bit more dense than this. They are 11,000 egg layers per unit. They are also doing tree ranging. You aggregate this to create a larger blueprint. For the broilers, we're looking at 250 production units, so we can get at least 1.7 million broilers, so that we can at least justify a very small scale processor to support and anchor a cluster. Below that, it's really very difficult to even break even processing chickens. Chicken processing is not a business, it's just a necessary thing we have to do, and that's the bottleneck in that case. But one of those clusters can give us enough impetus so that we can deploy at a scale that allows farmers to come together and generate a decent income that is fair for everybody. For egg layers, we're looking at around 30, based mostly on the bottleneck. Every one of these systems have a bottleneck. In the case of eggs, is transportation. So we need to calculate on the basis of how the product is moved from the processor to the consumer or to the markets. And that's the truck. The truck is really the bottleneck. And for that to be efficient, we need that truck moving at least 2.25 times a week, 273 truckloads. That means around 65.7 million eggs. That means 30 production units. That system level design, but this is baseline. So with that, again, I hope you have a lot of questions because we don't have time right now to walk you through every detail like that, and I'll pass it on to Tony.
Over the last 2 years, we've really taken a close look at what do we need to build, what kind of resources do we need to build so that we can continue to scale up. And one of the big pieces is training and consulting so that we can bring more people in and train more people. And then a little bit later I'll talk about markets and the business infrastructure to move products into the marketplace. But a couple of folks within the organization have been doing training for about 7 or 8 years with the poultry systems. The last few years, Ray had photos of the one production unit that was one of the first ones established. That was about a half of a production unit that we're now doing. And there's been a couple of other sites around the Northfield area, Faribault area, where we've operated training coops, gone through 4 or 5 different designs over the last 5 years, and so we've come to there's been many years of just the research and development going into the whole process. We laid this out in the last few months, kind of present what's in it for the farmer coming into the system, coming into the regenerative agriculture space that we're working on deploying. So we offer training from every aspect, from the business management guidance to the hands-on flock training of raising the chickens. Any other aspects of the training, Julie?
Well, just to say that one of the things we've done in the last couple of years is we're expanding our training capacity with our central farm, which we acquired in the last couple of years. There's kind of 2 sister farms that are working together. Our training is bilingual and is multifaceted. Also, just to say that we really do work hard on farmers being able to actually experience what it's like to own their own flocks, to work through their own financials. You know, Tony's going to talk about markets, but it's and it varies depending on what group that we're working with. Our training director is Bob Kell. He wasn't able to be here today, but that's been a trademark for Main Street Project, and we'll continue to work hard on the training and consultation and technical assistance front.
So all of these topics I'm going to talk about here in the next few minutes, we refer to them as derisking strategies. A lot of the nonprofit development work that's gone into the last few years has been how do we de-risk the entry to this kind of new system for people, because there's lots of challenges to get into farming, just to get into small farming or diversified operations. And so under like control and ownership, we talk about financial de-risking. Over the last few years, we've developed relationships with Compeer, with Shared Capital, with Iroquois Valley Farms, and some others, and working to have different options for different pieces of financing a farm, getting an operating loan, getting all the different pieces of financing that it takes to start something and to grow something. And we have pretty deep relationships in these different areas. And Bob Kell is also he's also one of the Renewing the Countryside.
Yep,
Farmland Hub advisors. So he's navigators. So he's started to put together business plans and kind of help people plan through the initial questions that you got to ask, and starting that planning process. Another big part of growing the system is starting and having access to perennial nursery stock. It's a really big challenge to go to some kind of conventional financing mechanism and say, I want to plant these trees and I'll make money in 7 years. And it's like, yeah, right, well, how are you going to cash flow that? And so we've thought about a lot of different ideas on how to cultivate the perennial plant stock, primarily hazelnuts to get the paddocks established, but then we're also growing elderberries and asparagus and some other crops. But we have, over the last 5 or 6 years, planted nurseries of hazelnuts from seeds that have been harvested from trees that were planted 10 years ago. And so each year we plant like 5,000 to 10,000 hazelnut seeds in nurseries, and just continuing to grow that, continuing to figure out how we can grow that with the new training farm that's coming online, and also having some business relationships with breeders. We work with Forest Agriculture Enterprises. We've sourced somewhere around 50,000 hazelnut trees from them over the last 3 years for a couple different farms that we've started building. And then also equipment commons. So to do these diversified systems, it takes a lot of different kinds of equipment depending on what you're doing. And we've tried to think through a lot of ways that we could cooperatively own equipment. Certain things that you might use once or twice a year, if we are building clusters of farmers that are within 20 miles of each other, then we could have some kind of cooperatively owned equipment. And depending on what works, some things makes most sense to have whatever that is at your farm, and you use it a lot. But we've started to think through some of the tree planting equipment and some of the harvesting equipment, some of the processing equipment, and we're looking to build towards commons-based management of some of that makes sense and that helps more people get involved. Over the last 7 or 8 years, we have put together a poultry production manual. Last year we started on a 5th edition of that manual. It's gone through many evolutions, and we're working on getting some of that material to a publisher here in the spring of this year, and looking to, by the end of 2019, we'll have a more formalized published production manual once we finalize that 5th edition. And we're going to finish the meat production manual that we're working on right now, and then we also have a 2nd edition egg manual that we're working on throughout this year. And that's just one of the key pieces that we need for training and to continue building training capacity. And then lots and lots of research and development. Ray touched on some of that. I kind of mentioned some of that. We're trying to build something that's really new. Every year we learn a lot and we make a lot of mistakes, but every year we get better and we make things more efficient and more productive, and just continue to work on that. In the last 2 years, we've been another piece is looking at what are the major bottlenecks to continuing to grow the system. And we identified that markets for poultry and eggs and processing, especially for meat chickens, were really the key points that we needed to work on. And so about 2 years ago, a consortium of 4 founders, we started Regeneration Farms LLC. And in last year, in 2018, we launched our brand, which is Tree Range Chicken. And we've been working for 2 years to build markets and sales and customer relationships all around the state, and in the Twin Cities and surrounding area and southeastern Minnesota. So we were able to launch a brand, we were processing chickens with a USDA processor that was about 90 miles away from our area. So we've had to bring the chickens to that processing facility. Over the last 2 years, we've been looking at used equipment. We've identified a bunch of different setups, a bunch of different designs and layouts for how to process poultry, and we've looked at these mobile semi-trailer mobile processing units, and we found 2 or 3 of them in the last 2 years that were used around the country, various designs. A couple of them didn't meet the throughput chickens per day that we wanted, or some of the other specs. But last year, towards the end of 2018, we found a unit. So here's processing. We've actually found a unit last year that was used up in Canada, and it had an air chilling system, which was one of the big key pieces of the processing specs that we wanted to be able to do. A lot of times poultry is cooled in an ice water bath, and the kind of newer way of processing is to do air chilling. The meat doesn't absorb any water, and there's less potential for contamination. So we really knew we wanted to get into, if we were going to get into processing, we wanted to do air chilling. And so we were able to secure a used unit last year, and we actually just got this delivered 2 weeks ago to Faribault. And so we'll be working on setting this up and working on getting USDA poultry processing set up here in 2019. And that will allow us to continue to grow the production throughput once we can get this up and running. So then another piece we know that we need to keep growing is to keep growing the perennial nursery stock, and I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who's going to talk about a new campaign we're working on.
So I'm Chris Gamer, and I have to take a minute to stop right here and say that without the support and encouragement of a guy named Dean Harrington, I wouldn't be here today, and this organization would be fundamentally different. Dean was there at the beginning of both the Sustainable Farming Association and the Land Stewardship Project, and he passed away last weekend. And I just really want to recognize that we are all standing on the shoulders of our ancestors that got us where we are, and express my gratitude for Dean. So the Million Hazelnut campaign, right? The thing about hazelnuts is that they really are the pioneer species to poultry-centered regenerative agriculture here in the Midwest, right? If you're interested in tree-range chickens, this program is an opportunity to help you lower your cost to getting your forest mast over your chickens installed, right? However, the Million Hazelnut campaign isn't just focused on tree-range chickens. What brought me to this is my passion for the environment. The Million Hazelnut campaign is a standalone program that uses the 5 soil health principles to sequester carbon, build our soil, protect our water, and feed the world, or at least our part of it. What is it about? The Million Hazelnut campaign is an initiative that seeks to unite farmers with environmentally conscious citizens in creating a new perennial food industry while combating climate change by providing hazelnut rootstock to farmers across the Midwest. So there's 2 basic components. There's a sponsor and there's a host, right? Now, this is really, we haven't launched this program yet. We're planning to launch it next month. And I wanted to come here before the launch to ask for your help, right? In order for this to work, we have to find host places to sponsor the plants, or to put the plants in the ground and grow them. And one of our minimum requirements is we're looking to go big, right? The smallest planting we want to do is like 1,000 plants, right? This is just about getting to that system scale where we can manage the processing and have it work economically, right? So if your chapter or your church or your Boy Scout troop or your school wants to help us with this program, the other benefit that you can have to your community is that if you raise enough sponsorships to sponsor 1,000 plants, we'll make sure that those plantings happen in your community. Right? We'll work with you to meet that geographical classifier. This really is about the Midwest region. It's not just about promoting the chicken thing, although it works nicely that way. It's really about covering up as much land as we can with a perennial crop that implements the 5 soil health principles. What this is really, primarily, it's a fundraiser. Nothing happens without the funding, right? People understand that. People also understand that climate change is happening now, right? This isn't a problem that we can choose to put off to deal with until later. Putting roots in the ground is a real way to to make a difference. It's the way to reestablish the carbon cycle that supported life on this planet in the first place. Take the carbon out of the air, put it in the soil, you got a high carbon soil that grows high quality food. That's the beauty of the soil health principles. So if you choose to partner with us and help us support this program, web design, web content, web memes, right? Web videos is stuff that we can supply to you to help keep this as an engaged topic for your community, right? It's not just a one-off thing. We're going to be behind this until we get to our goals of covering up the landscape again. Why hazelnuts? And again, it comes back to the soil health principles. My passion for this is about carbon sequestration. What are we going to do to face this problem? One of the things that I go through in my life is that I look at these things and I talk about them and I end up getting called like Professor Doom, you know. Why so negative, right? Well, I'm not being negative. I'm taking a realistic assessment of where we're at, right? It's time for us to take action. The IPCC, you know, 3 years ago they told us we had 100 years, right? Now they're telling us we got 12, right? It's really time to be doing something. You know, the renewable energy movement and everything like that, that's fine for trying to slow down carbon emissions, but we have to take the carbon out of the air now. The soil health principles, as espoused by the Sustainable Farming Association, are the key tool for doing that in a biological, healthy way. That's my passion. I don't want to get too carried away. But the other beautiful thing about the hazelnut is that it's not just a one-size-fits-all. We want to look at your farm and figure out how do you implement this secondary revenue stream into your operation. Right? We're not going to come in and tell you everything that you have to do. We're going to know, are you going to do a silvopasture mix? Do you want to free-range chickens under it? Do you want to feed goats? Do you want to feed cows? You know, there's different ways to implement this as a silvopasture mix. Works great for alley crops. I, planted 6 miles of garlic in one of the alleys between our hazelnut rows. It works great. Buffer strips. Okay, so before colonization happened, there was a 5,000 acre woods here, or 5,000 square miles of woods, known as the Big Woods. Okay, that's gone. Right? Now that happened to existed on the upper Mississippi River watershed, right? Which has been identified as a major contributor to the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, right? Buffer strips. If we replant all of our waterways with this really robust plant that causes the water to infiltrate into the soil and not run off with that nitrogen in it to kill the Gulf of Mexico, we're making a huge difference environmentally, right? While we're feeding each other. It's a big deal. Windbreaks. Earlier today, I heard somebody talking about the danger of relying on the snow to cover our landscapes in the wintertime because the wind is changing. It's stronger. You need windbreaks if you want to keep your soil. If you want to keep farming, you need to have soil. So, and then this is my favorite one, really. Soybeans are actually toxic. As humans, we can't eat raw soybeans. They're full of estrogen disruptors and all kinds of things that just don't belong in a human body. And yet that's covering up, what, 1/3 of our landscape? And we have to till every year to get it there? That's just not the right choice to be making here in the 21st century. We need a perennial substitute for that crop, and we have one. It's just about getting it planted to scale so that it works, right? The other why hazelnuts question, well, I kind of just went over it. They taste better than soybeans. They do. It's healthy, delicious, it's in demand, it's versatile. There is a global demand for this. You know what Nutella is. You know that if you go to the coffee shop, they're going to have hazelnut flavored coffee. They come in candy bars. So I didn't want to overstate my case, and I said I took it down from 60% average oil to 50. And then I was reading again last night, and it's actually a 60% oil by content. Okay? I have to hurry up and shut up. So if you want to know more about this, get a hold of me. I would really appreciate your help with this. It's not going to work if it doesn't have a lot of human energy behind it. So there you go.
So we developed a video for the campaign, and we're developing a lot of content. It's almost like writing a book, 10 books, and building an organization. That's what it feels like. But we're going to house it under Main Street Project, and we're going to also, it's a multi-organizational campaign. But this is just our first attempt at making a campaign video, so we're going to play that for you.
Every ecology has its own blueprint, its own natural expressions, and interactions that take place in endless ways here on planet Earth. When you picture a place like the Midwest, you might envision rivers, lakes, and prairies. Or you may think of the grain belt, the homestead, the place where the farmers live. Well, actually, it's a lot more diverse than that, and diversity is what we are striving for. However, the diversity we depend on for survival is being threatened. The majority of farms in the Midwest have been perpetually driven toward crops like corn and soy for decades by industry influence, economics, banks, and federal policies. Farmers have fewer options and are trapped in this system. The crops they grow are dependent on synthetic inputs and tillage, which is eroding our soils and polluting our waterways. We think of this region as the backbone of America. We are proud to be farmers, but this system is causing the eradication of biodiversity, the erosion of topsoil, is deforesting our land, and contributing to nearly 30% of global carbon emissions, more than from any other source. Our solution? The Million Hazelnut Campaign, the reforestation of the Midwest, and it starts with the hazelnut. But before we get into that, let's dig deeper into the problem. We know that 1/3 of the cost of agriculture is energy. Energy in the form of fertilizers, pesticides, machinery, oil, packaging, water, and of course, our own energy. You might wonder, how much of this is actually necessary? Well, it turns out this system is wasting a lot of energy. Consider this. The average farmer in the Midwest is using 40% of the agricultural landscape to grow feed for animals. Animals raised in confinement, being fed grains not even meant for their consumption. Grains grown at such a large scale that the only solution for management is using chemical inputs. These fertilizers, pesticides, and the processing and shipping alone is creating a huge waste stream, while the solution is right at our feet. So what can we do? How do we begin to shift such a deeply embedded system? How can we return our farmland to a more natural state? Can we create an agricultural system that decreases the need for fossil fuel-based energy and transfers that value to restoring the ecology, the economy, and empowers farmers to take control of their future and the future of our planet? The answer to all of these questions is within our reach, and by integrating perennial systems into our farms, we can put carbon back in the soil, provide habitat for wildlife, produce food, prevent soil erosion, and begin the creation of a regenerative future. One of the most promising sectors for reversing these trends is called agroforestry. With agroforestry, farmers can integrate annual crops like grains and vegetables in alignment with perennial trees and shrubs. The hazelnut is not only native to the Midwest landscape and has been used as ancient foods, but also works in perfect symbiosis with annual cropping systems and animal integration. This makes it easier for farmers to afford and scale up, and can put carbon back in the soil, provide habitat for wildlife, produce food, prevent soil erosion, and begin the creation of a regenerative future. We are planting thousands of trees and shrubs, but we are destined for millions. The future is perennial, and farms look a lot like a thriving forest, with the capacity to produce enough food, fuel, fiber, timber, and wealth for generations to come. Join our Million Hazelnut campaign and help us get started down the road to regeneration. Just by giving $7, you will take a hazelnut from seed to farm. We will assure that 1 million hazelnuts get planted on farms across the Midwest. Imagine how many more millions will be planted from there. Imagine a regenerative future.
All right, that's the Million Hazelnut Campaign. Thanks for checking that out. And Rocky's gonna
Close it.
close it down and leave you excited.
I love that video. Good job, Will.
Thank you.
Awesome job.
Yep.
So to close our panel, I just wanted to thank you for coming to our presentation and say a few last words. So we're in a time where innovation not only matters, but is greatly needed. Everything we do and choose not to do greatly affects what the future will look like for all of us. We know that changing the way we produce food is how we will create a better world, one in which we all thrive. And all of us, I believe, can be leaders in that. That's why we're all really here today. We have shared with you about our efforts to scale our poultry-centered regenerative agroforestry system and the ways in which we can offer support to farmers who share the same values we do. Whether you're an established, a beginning, or an aspiring farmer, if you can imagine a regenerative future, why not help us in making it happen? We have an opportunity on Thursday, March 21st. We'll be hosting a listening session at our Northfield office, and it'll be a time to learn more about our cluster development plans and to share personal experiences and perspectives. Our listening session aims to create the space where we can network and engage in really meaningful conversations. This is how we can transform ideas into reality, and in our case, ideas into farms that provide real economic stability for farmers and entire communities while preserving our biodiversity, water, and lands. Which brings me to our Million Hazelnut campaign that you just watched and heard about. We believe that by reforesting the Midwest, we can produce enough food, fuel, fiber, and wealth for generations while simultaneously offsetting our carbon and combating climate change. We have the support of the SFA Driftless chapter in this, but today we're asking all SFA chapters to come on board and help us promote the Hazelnut campaign and engage every farmer in your networks. We invite everyone in this room to be a part of this story, so please find us after the panel. We'll stick around for a bit longer and would love to connect with all of you, so thank you.